Some scientists are not scientific about science, good people, um, good in the particular science they do, good about being scientific about certain things in the world, scientific about quantum mechanics, electromagnetism, evolutionary biology, but not scientific about science. Interesting. It's something to keep in mind. You got to look at the person and judge what they're saying individually and see if an argument they're making is based in evidence and developed rigorously from there, like a geometric proof. Try to work on that to the degree you can. Just because someone's an authority does not mean anything, except that they're more likely right in certain cases if you're just judging generally, like, something's wrong with you. You don't know or understand what's wrong and what to deal with it. You got to trust a doctor. You don't have time. You need some quick decision made. Let's say you're in a car accident, major accident. You don't have time to think about, well, what's really wrong with me? How do we assess this? Does this person know what they're talking about? Blah, blah, blah. No one cares. You go to someone that you can trust and let them work on you. But in many cases, especially when someone's outside what they've studied, we need to look at what is their argument and be careful about believing them. Like if any scientist is talking about what science is, no. We got to be scientific about science to know what science is, not just scientific about some material things or whatever. Not really scientific about glass, scientific about zoology, scientific about some ecology, whatever, scientific about science itself, science about what's going on. It's interesting. Some people, as I say, who have a podcast, two people, PhDs in biology, smart, nice to listen to, as I said, do not know what science is in theory. As I say, what they do in practice or what they're doing kind of without thinking about it would be a little bit different. But they discussed certainty recently, and it was interesting that they say a young child would think they're certain about something. And notice that if they were scientific about thinking, they would know that that's irrelevant what the kid thinks. It's not evidence to consider in thinking what certainty is and seeing if people are certain. A 4-year-old or even a 10-year-old knowing if they're certain or something, they don't know how to introspect and think. It's a joke. That's evidence. Not even evidence, is something I throw out is irrelevant. Whereas they take it seriously as, oh, this is what certainty is. A kid thinks they're certain. No, they're not. That's an emotion. No kid at 4 or 5 years old can introspect and see what's going on and see and verify their conclusions. They don't even know about that yet. Verification, proof, going through a sequence of steps, no. Even knowing much about the difference between the inner and the outer, knowing what ideas are versus a thing. This is the concept of dog versus a dog. Concept, immaterial, universal, timeless. This dog, concrete, material, connex. Hurting a little bit, sorry, getting a little tired, so conducts affecting tired eyes, but material, concrete, individual, singular, temporary, changing, idea, non-changing, things like that, they don't do that. Or thinking that you got to go through some long reasoning process to say that electricity and magnetism are different aspects of the same thing. They're not even going to get that. Knowing if they're certain about something, they're not even capable of assessing the quality of their conclusions. They're not even at that state to be able to say possible certain or possible probable certain. They cannot assess evidence. So as I say, that's one example. Some people are totally unscientific about science and logic. It's something we need to help people with. We need to improve education with, helping people, not just having people memorize and thinking that, oh, memorizing is all that there is to learning on the human level. You know, there's different ways we can use the word learning. We learn skills. We can learn to play tennis. We can learn to run properly instead of just doing some weird kind of thing, running like thing. We can learn to run with good biomechanics. We can learn to breathe. 50 to 70% of Americans, from what I've heard, do not breathe correctly. They have suboptimal breathing. Breathing is a function. It's not just sucking in air like a vacuum cleaner. Even then, it's got, processes got to go through and all that. But breathing is a function which can be done more well or less well. It can be dysfunctional. We can have dysfunctional sleeping patterns, things like that. So just because someone does something doesn't mean it's proper or in good context. So with certainty and with thinking about logic, we need to look at, contact again, distracting, but we need to look at what someone thinks about something. We need to see for certainty there has to be evidence for something. There can be different degrees of evidence. Conclusions aren't automatic. There's a hierarchy of things. There's conclusions which are more abstract, which depend upon other abstractions down to the evidence of the senses, some things like that. And they need to learn that they learn a little bit, and that suggests something might be the case. They learn a little bit more. Oh, this is probably. They learn more. Oh, we know this for certain. And we can see that by studying science or seeing how we learn things. Then, when they start to assess their own thinking and amount of evidence, quality of reasoning, then they can judge certainty. And notice that these PhDs never even considered that, not knowing enough about logic or epistemology or science qua science. They were kind of blind and clueless to it, unaware. Interesting. So that's one thing we should do in teaching, help people see what they have, There's, as I say, there's different kinds of learning. And conceptual learning is what we really need to focus on. There's these other learnings that are important as well. Breathing, running correctly, playing tennis, having good technique. But in education, the thing we need to really get right so we can get these other things right, the thing we need to learn well is how to think logically and how to assess our evidence. And so people need to see with some examples that here we can learn some words. You are learning something, but all it is a word string. Or you can learn a little bit and you're putting something together, but it's just saying something to have certain social feelings going on. You might know some people like that. They can talk some stuff, but all they've done is learn how to use words to make people feel in a certain way and to get a certain response. They don't know what it really means in reality, and you can learn that by asking them if they know what they mean. Then you can see what certainty is, if they're certain about something, I should say. But because people aren't taught how to assess evidence as much, which we should, because they're not taught, they don't know. And a lot of people don't know what certainty is. Then you got these PhDs in biology thinking certainty is a feeling. They're confusing like passionately holding an opinion with certainty, something like that. They're confusing strength of emotion or believing one is right versus being, being certain about a conclusion. They can't differentiate these two, and that shows it's not being scientific. A scientist would identify these things and make contrasts between them. How are they different? What's the nature of each thing? What's the cause-effect relationship? Let me think about what certainty is. Why do we have it? What is its nature? What causes certainty? How does it come up in epistemology? Like certainty in contrast to what? Just like fluids in contrast to solids. Or how does electricity flow in gases versus in solids? What's the contrast and things like that? Or what's flying of a bird like versus flying of a flying squirrel, which is really like gliding. We've got contrast. What's the difference between a falling object, a projectile, and something self-propelled? What's the difference between chemicals in one column versus in another column? What are differences between gases and metals? Contrasts like that, if someone knows how to do science, they'd get stuff like that, then they could apply it in being scientific about science. But they're not. And so we should try to bring that into play in school so people can do better in their careers. It's not merely an academic thing. It's something important to help people really know how to get scientific methods and apply them in other areas. Being scientific about thinking, being scientific about emotions, being scientific about values, about their friends. What is their friend really like? What cause-effect relationships are there with their friend, like means and ends, trying to get certain goals? What drives the person? What do you have in common? How are you different? How can you help them live better? If it's someone you care about, you should have a selfish interest in them in helping them out. That's what a friend would be. Someone you really care about. Otherwise, what's the point? And stuff at work. When someone can think better, then they can get these ideas and apply them at work to know what's the nature of the things, what's the cause-effect relationships, how can they do better at work also. So this will have effects in other areas of life. And then people will know more what's going on up here. A lot of people are confused. It's this black box and some learning, you're just talking about stuff out here and there's this mysterious stuff going on here. People don't know well enough how to study, how to learn, what's going on, why do we do this, how can we have a better program at work to teach people to certain ideas and principles they need. If we knew better what was going on up here, we could do that better, and it would help us be better in a lot of different areas. Reporting, work, designing work programs, all that. So something would help to get down. Being more scientific about science. Peace.